All right, when I say the word witch, what pops into your head? Is it a woman with a pointy hat, a green face, maybe a broomstick? Yeah, that's what we all think of. But today, we're gonna tear that cartoon image apart and uncover the terrifying, all too human story of the real witch hunts. On the left, you've got the fairy tale, but on the right, that's the reality. And it's so much more chilling. See, the people who were accused weren't some kind of supernatural monsters. They were neighbors, they were mothers, they were healers and midwives. The people who knew about herbs and brought babies into the world, and that pact with the devil, far more often, it was just the crushing vulnerability that came with poverty or being a widow in a world that didn't protect you. And this wasn't some minor historical blip. We're talking about 50,000 people. Just let that number sink in for a second. An estimated 50,000 human beings were executed for the crime of witchcraft in just a few centuries. This was no fairy tale. This was a massacre fueled by a mass hysteria that had absolutely deadly consequences. So who were these 50,000 victims? What did they have in common? Let's dig in and create a profile of the accused. Well, the first thing that jumps out is an absolutely undeniable and chilling pattern. The victims were overwhelmingly women. We're talking about a staggering 80% of all those who were executed. This wasn't just a hunt for witches. In a very real way, it was a hunt for women. So why? Why women? The justification was basically baked right into the social and religious beliefs of the time. You had influential texts and church leaders who essentially taught that women were morally weaker, more driven by lust, and because of that, way more susceptible to the devil's temptations. It was a deeply misogynistic worldview that made women the perfect scapegoats for everything that went wrong. And that targeting got even more specific when you look at the kinds of roles women held. Midwives and healers were a huge target. I mean, think about it. If a baby was stillborn or an illness took a bad turn, who was the easiest person to blame? The woman who was right there. But it was also the stuff of everyday life. If milk went sour, people might look at the dairy maid. If a child got sick, suspicion could fall on their caretaker. Simply being a woman in one of these roles, especially if you were poor or widowed, was incredibly dangerous. So, how did this happen on such a massive, terrifying scale? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was a perfect storm of social chaos, religious extremism, and raw political power. You can almost think of it as a four-step recipe for creating hysteria. First, you start with a society that's already on edge. There's climate change, the Little Ice Age causing famine, there are plagues, there's constant war, life feels random and scary. Step 2, you add a heavy dose of religious dogma, like the infamous book Malleus Maleficarum, or The Hammer of Witches, which was literally a manual on how to find, prosecute, and punish witches. Step 3, those first two ingredients create the perfect conditions for scapegoating. When everything is going wrong, you need someone to blame. And Step 4, the final crucial ingredient, the whole thing gets an official stamp of approval. And get this, it was mostly local secular courts, not some big church inquisition, that carried out the vast majority of these trials and executions. This quote really just nails it. The absolute worst period of the witch hunts happened during a century of total crisis. When people are terrified and feel like their world is falling apart, they look for a simple answer and an easy person to blame. And of course, the most famous example of this hysteria is the Salem witch trials. And just look at how fast this fire spread. It all starts in January with a couple of girls acting strangely. By February, 3 of the most vulnerable women in the community are accused. By that summer, people are being hanged. The whole thing was a powder keg of local grudges, land disputes, and religious panic, all exploding in a legal system that had completely gone off the rails. And the legal jet fuel for the Salem fire was this bonkers idea of spectral evidence. Just try to imagine this. You're on trial for your life, and the main evidence against you is that someone else claims your ghost, your spirit, appeared to them in a dream and pinched them. How do you possibly defend yourself against that? You can't. It was a legal trick that basically guaranteed a conviction. But it's a huge mistake to think this all looked the same everywhere. It's easy to picture one big monolithic witch hunt, but the reality was way more complex. Look at these numbers. The German territories, which were a chaotic patchwork of tiny states with no real central control, saw an unbelievable 25,000 executions. Local panics could just spiral there. But then you look over at Ireland, a kingdom with a strong centralized legal system, and there were only 4. Local politics and how power was structured, that was everything. And here's a fact that just flips the whole script on you. While misogyny was a key ingredient almost everywhere, it wasn't the only one. In England, yeah, over 90% of the accused were women. But then you look at Iceland, and it's the total opposite. 90% of the accused were men, usually for using magic to get ahead or harm their rivals. It just goes to show you how much local beliefs and anxieties could completely change the face of the witch. Okay, so this all happened centuries ago. Ancient history, right? Why should we still care? Because the fundamental pattern, using fear to persecute a designated other, is a tragically human one. It hasn't gone away. So let's talk about that enduring legacy. To really get why this matters, we have to see the human faces behind the staggering numbers. This is Anna Goldie. She's known as Europe's last witch, executed in Switzerland way late in the game in 1782. The official charge was that she, a maid, had bewitched her employer's child. The grim reality? It's pretty clear she was having an affair with her powerful boss, and he used the witchcraft accusation as a weapon to get rid of her and silence her. Her story is this brutal reminder of how the charge became a tool for people in power to destroy anyone who was inconvenient. And you know, the term witch hunt itself has been on a wild journey. It starts in 1486 as a literal justification for torture and murder. Then, with Salem, it becomes the ultimate symbol of mass hysteria. Fast forward to the 1950s, and playwright Arthur Miller brilliantly turns it into a political metaphor for the McCarthy-era communist hunts. And now, today, we use the term to describe pretty much any kind of public persecution or moral panic. And that brings us to the final, really unsettling question. The mechanics of a witch hunt, the fear, the social anxiety, the scapegoating of a vulnerable group, the public pile-on, none of that has gone away. It just wears a different mask now. So the question this history forces us to ask is this: every era has its witches. Who are ours?